Alright guys, we're going to look at the quadratic formula. This is something that we will give you, but it's a good thing to learn because you will use it the rest of your mathematical career. Okay? So for any quadratic equation in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. So this is something we've been dealing with since the beginning of this unit. Then when we are looking for x, we're solving for the zeros, the solutions, the roots, the x-intercept. If it can't be factored, sometimes we have to find irrational answers, and that's when we use the quadratic formula. Now, factoring will work sometimes. Quadratic formula will work every single time. Even if it'll factor, you can use the quadratic formula. Okay? So it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. This, you should realize, is what we used yesterday to find the discriminant. Okay? Divided by 2a. So you're going to put this in here and plug and chug. Okay? So you put the equation in standard form if it is not already in standard form. Okay? And set it equal to 0. So that's what we were learning yesterday. That's what we have to do. Determine a, b, and c. Plug all values into the formula using substitution. So you're going to use substitution to plug them in. Simplify the radical first. Use the plus or minus symbols to split into two equations and solve both equations. Solve both. Okay? So yesterday we learned b squared minus 4ac predicts how many solutions. If it was positive, we had 2 real. If it was negative, we had no real solutions. And if it was 0, we had 1 real. So just to recap. Okay, so if we go down here and we look at this first one, is it set equal to 0? Yes. Is it in standard form A, B, C? Yes. So we're going to list our A's and our B and our C. A equals 2. B equals negative 11, and C equals negative 6. Okay, so knowing these, then we're going to take our formula here at the top of the page, and we're going to plug it and chug it. All right, so we're solving for x, so it is negative b. So that's negative 11, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c divided by 2 times a. Okay, so real quickly I want to point out a couple of things. Anytime you square this number, it's going to be positive. Because if you square a negative, it's positive. You square a positive, it's positive. So this number right here, not the number under the radical, but this b squared should always be positive. Okay, don't forget it's negative b, so if your b is negative, that would be positive here. If your b is positive, it'll be negative. So it's always going to be the opposite sign of the b. Alright, so that's going to give me 11 plus or minus. Now let's go ahead and just do this above. 11 squared is 121. A negative times a negative is a positive. 4 times 2 is 8, times 6 is 48. So the next step, we're going to simplify that radical. 121 plus 48 is 169. Now if you can't do that, and some of you can't, then get your calculator. Multiply 11 times 11, get 121. Negative 4 times positive 2 times negative 6 will be a positive 48. It's very important that you watch your signs here because you can mess up on one sign and mess the whole problem up. Alright, so here, this would give me 11 plus, the square root of 169 is 13 over 4. So that's one part. And then we're splitting it into two equations. So now it would be 11 minus 13 over 4. Now I can't just leave my answer like this. I need to simplify. So 11 plus 13 is 24. Divided by 4 is 6. Okay, so we're going to use these little squiggly marks to put 6 here. 11 minus 13 is negative 2 over 4. Simplify that would be negative 1/2. So what does this tell me? This tells me if I were to draw my graph at positive 6 and negative 1/2, this graph would cross the x-axis. This is not an ordered pair, 6 1/2, negative 1/2. This is x equals 6 and x equals negative 1/2. So these are two of your solutions, your roots and everything. Okay, let's look at one last thing here before we move on. This 169, that is our discriminant. Okay, that is what we did yesterday. This is positive, so it told me I was going to have two solutions and they were going to be real. So you can see here I do have two real solutions. So that discriminant helps me check my work. All right, here, first step, set it equal to 0, so I need to subtract 10. I get 4x squared minus 2x minus 6 equals 0. Now it's in standard form. A equals 4, B equals negative 2, and C equals negative 6. You always want to write these because then you don't have to think about it and you can just plug them in and check. Okay, so we have x equals negative b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c over divided by 2 times a. So I just plugged in my b, my a, and my c. Notice b goes in twice, a goes in twice, but c only has one spot. Okay? Negative times a negative is positive 2, plus or minus. So come back up here, we have 4, negative times a negative is positive. 4 times 4 is 16, times 6 is 96. 96 plus 4 would be the square root of 100, and that's going to be over 8. This here tells me I'm going to have two real answers. So I get 2 plus, what's the square root of 100? 10 over 8, and 2 minus 10 over 8. So these two can, okay, so in this point right here, some of you are like, look, let's close that. No, you have to do what's on top and then divide. So 2 plus 10 is 12. So this would be 12 over 8, and then we got to simplify that. 4 will go into both of those numbers. 4 going to 12 3 times, 4 going to 8, 2. So that's 3 halves. Then 2 minus 10 is negative 8 over 8, which equals negative 1. Okay, so my final answer is 3 halves of negative 1. Again, that would cross the axis twice, so 2 real. Okay, moving down here, we got 2 more to do. And guys, I know that this is long, but you've got to practice. That's what's going to make it worthwhile. Okay, we got to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to move my 57, and you could move the 8, but I like to move everything to the right. So I get 8x squared minus 55x minus 7 equals 0. All right, so my A is 8. And my B is negative 55. And my C is negative 7. So here we go. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b here, which is negative 55 squared, minus 4 times 8 times negative 7. All divided by 2 times 8. All right, negative 55 squared, and I use the calculator for this, is 3,025. Negative and a negative is positive. 56 times 4 is 224. Okay? When I add those two together, I get 55 plus or minus the square root, 3,249 over 16. Now, if you take your calculator and you take the square root of 3,249, you get 57. So we were nice. It does not always come out a nice one, but we'll be practicing those later. So we get 55 plus 57 over 16, and 55 minus 57 over 16. Again, they may be big numbers, but we give you a calculator. You can do that. Okay, so now x equals 55 plus 57 is 112 divided by 16 is 7. So that first one is 7. 55 minus 57 is negative 2 over 16. So that's negative 1/8. Okay. So hopefully this is getting easier. Please stop the video and do the next one. And then let's come back and see how you did. All right, great. So hopefully you said A equals 1, B equals negative 16, and C equals 64. And then you came over and you plugged and chucked, so you get negative 16 plus or minus negative 16 squared minus 4 times 1 times 64 over 2 times 1. Alright, so that's going to make it positive 16 plus or minus the square root. So 16 times 16 is 256. 4 times 64 is 256. 256 minus 256 is 0 over 2. So what is this 0 as the discriminant? Tell me right here. I'm going to have one real. So this is only going to give me one real. The rest of these had 2. This is going to be 1. And let's look and see why that's the case. All right, what is the square root of 0? 0. So if I add or subtract 16 plus 0 over 2, or 16 minus 0 over 2, kind of wasted my time here writing this down, right? But what is 16 plus 0? 0. Divided by 2? 8. What is 16 minus 0? Oh, sorry, that was 16. 16 minus 0? 16. Divided by 2? 8. So therefore, the only true answer here is 8. Okay, so let's go back up. I want to show you one last thing before we quit. Say that you had this problem on the test, and it was saying, hey, I want you to solve this, or I want you to factor this, okay? So we can sit there and we can take this and we can divide it up here. And we should know when we cross multiply that this is going to be 8 and 8 and x minus 8, x minus 8 equals 0. Okay? So this was the factors. If I set this factor equal to 0 and I solve, I get x equals 8. So we'll be doing this later in the week, solving by factoring. You already know how to factor. So I just wanted to kind of, and then if I do the same factor equal to 0, I get the same thing. So you'll be able to choose which way you do this. Please, 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 make sure you know the discriminant, because we will not give you this formula. It is under this one, but you must know when I say find the discriminant, I'm talking about b squared minus 4ac. If I asked you to solve using the quadratic formula, that's this one. All right, guys, check plan book. Thanks and have a great day.